Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. Today's episode is going to be a ceramics repair video. I'm going to show you how to fill in cracks and glue your ceramics together. All of the treatments I am going to go over today are going to involve bisqued ceramics, which means it's been through the first firing and yet to have a glaze put on it. These type of glue ups and repair jobs are not meant to go back into the kiln, so this is something that you want to do to your bisqueware if you're going to be painting the piece. You definitely do not want to do these things that I'm going to be showing today to pieces that are going to go back into the kiln, because the adhesives that I'm using and the fillers will melt in the kiln and will make your pieces fall apart and bad things will happen. The first thing I'm going to go over is filling cracks, like an area like this here where it split apart and it cracked. You didn't do a good job with your blending and you have some cracking happening. If your piece was not constructed properly, these things happen. For repairing cracks, your best bet is to go with a joint compound. So all I have is this 5-gallon bucket. This is your basic wall patch, but it's only lightweight. You want to stay away from this stuff, this spackle. This is not going to be strong enough to do the job with filling. You definitely want something that's more of a joint compound. This does come in a smaller size container. So I've scooped out some of my joint compound and put it on this plate to fill in a crack. Take a bit of the compound and put it into my crack here with my finger. Now obviously with this I'm covering over this texture. I'm only just applying it here because I'm just sacrificing this piece as my demo. The cool thing about this joint compound is you could use this to emulate fake snow on top of your ceramic train. If you watched my earlier video and you decided to make a ceramic train and you wanted to Christmas theme it, you could put this stuff on the top of the ceramic train. You could also use it as decorative detail, throw it in a piping bag that you buy for cake decorating, pipe it onto your ceramic, pipe it onto plaster. There's so many different ways you can use it. As long as you've already succumbed to painting your ceramics, this can be an extra. If like you forgot to add on a detail that you wanted to put on, you could make it out of joint compound. It is a very slip-like texture, so it's not going to be something that you're going to do major sculpting with. There are two ways to clean up your joint compound. One is to take a damp rag and just use that to go along the area. You want to catch it when it is set up just a bit. If you're doing this on a smooth surface, you can go ahead and wait for it to fully cure and then just take a bit of sandpaper, sand until it's smooth. It works great for repairing cracks in areas that do not have texture. I have a little small crack that I brought up earlier. We can go ahead and put some of that in there. I'm going to wait for this to dry and then I'll come in with a bit of sandpaper, my damp rag, and go in and clean that up. There are a lot of adhesives out there that you can get to glue ceramics. I prefer to go with ones that are a chemical reaction, and two of the main ones I use are this 5-minute epoxy that for the most part can be purchased at your regular hardware store, and the other one I like to use is this PC7. Both of these products are a 2-part type of epoxy. PC7 is a little bit more like a putty, whereas this clear 5-minute Loctite epoxy is going to be very thin. Since this epoxy is so thin, it can get very messy. The thing with the PC7 though is solid coloring. It may impair your piece. For things that have already been glazed, I tend to like to go with the epoxy because it'll dry clear. If you're going to do painting on your piece, then the PC7 is much easier to use when it comes to the application. I'm gonna glue on a piece that broke off. This was my yarn that was going all around my sculpture. When this fired up, I had some shrinkage happen. Separated here first, and once it cracked there, it then became really vulnerable here, and in the transporting, it did crack as I crack more of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the clear epoxy to do this repair. Even though I am going to be painting this, I just want to demonstrate how this epoxy works. This says 5-minute epoxy. This is not 5-minute epoxy in the world of ceramics. This is at least 20 minutes to 45 minutes where it needs to be held in place for the seal to hold. So in addition to having this epoxy, you're going to want some tape or something to kind of rig up your piece for holding. The other thing you're gonna want is some chemical gloves so that the chemicals don't absorb in my skin, a disposable plate, and some mixing sticks. It's a 2-part epoxy and it is of equal parts. I'm gonna put about a pea-size amount of each of these substances into my plate and mix them up. One is a hardener and the other is the resin. When the two come together, they create a chemical reaction, and that's what does the bonding. I prefer to use these type of glues. When you're using the kind that you're reliant on air, sometimes your weather and your conditions can do funky things. So that is the reason why I prefer to use these chemical reaction type glues. So I'm just going to put a pea-size of each on my plate. So I'm trying to eyeball the same amount. I'm gonna use my stir stick, and you do not want to be doing this on a good surface. Pick something that you can get dirty. You don't want to be gluing this on your dining table or something like that. I have it down on some scrap cardboard, and then I also am using a disposable plate and stir stick. Work fairly quickly so that it doesn't set, and you need to be kind of neat. Once it dries and hardens in place, it's pretty much stuck there. Just applying a little bit. And here's where the tape comes in handy. I'm gonna let the tape be my clamp. I know I have some gapping, and I'm going to show another method once this dries on how to repair those gaps. This epoxy is not that easy to sand. Don't go getting it all over the place. You can paint it. It's pretty obvious where the epoxy was, and it's going to kind of look like a glazed finish. This really needs to be left alone at least 24 hours. Set it up somewhere that it can just sit and not be touched, and walk away. Piece here on this hat, I'm going to use the PC7 to repair it, but it's an awkward shape. This could be really tricky trying to navigate how you're going to get a piece of tape on here to hold it on. So I'm going to show you a trick that I like to use. I am going to apply 2 different types of adhesive. One is going to be the PC7, which is going to do the main hold, but I'm also going to be using my super glue, and I have Instaset. You can use regular super glue for this job. The Instaset instantly sets the glue so I don't have to hold it. This is going to give me a temporary hold. You don't want to use your super glue as your main adhesive, and in essence I'm using it like a clamp or in place of tape. Wherever I'm putting the super glue, I don't want to put the putty, but I also want to make sure I have enough putty on there to do the hold. And again, this stuff is going to be colored. Whether you're using the PC7 or the putty, you want to make sure that you don't contaminate your containers. Always use 2 mixing spoons. When I applied the epoxy to the plate, I put the 2 beads away from each other so that I wasn't contaminating the containers they're in. It's especially important for these guys. You don't want to use the same stir stick. These are a 1-to-1 as well, so you want to put the same amount of each one onto your plate. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to break my stick so that I have a clean area, that I'm not contaminating this black one here. Eyeballing is fine. You don't have to do a weighted thing. You seal these off so that I can keep them nice and fresh. Both of these are available on Amazon. PC7 you can get sometimes at smaller local hardware stores like in Ace in smaller containers. You don't need to buy a big thing of this. But the Loctite 5-minute epoxy can be found also in smaller tubes in the paint department at Home Depot or Lowe's. Make sure that you're buying the Loctite 5-minute epoxy. Gorilla Glue makes something that is called an epoxy, but their glue expands, and that's not what you want. Okay, so I'm gonna just take these 2 halves. You'll know you have a good mixture when they're fully blended into one color and you no longer have streaks of either one. So this putty is going to dry this color charcoal black. That is why I said you only want to do this to something that you're going to be painting. Decide what's more important to you. So I'm going to go ahead and apply. It can be sanded, so you can sand it up if you need to. And that should do my temp hold there until the PC7 is dry enough. And that's going to need, again, another 24 to 48 hour set. I did story hats in multiple videos before, and coming up I'm going to be having ceramics roundup of all the projects I've done over this past year, and I'm going to go ahead and finish them. Please make sure you are subscribed to this channel if you are not, so that you can be around for that. All of the epoxy is set. It's been 24 hours, and I just want to show you one last thing. I'm going to start repairing this crack. There was too much of a lift. separated. In order to fix that before I paint it, I want to fill that in so that it looks a little bit more seamless. If it's not a large crack, you could definitely take care of this with the joint compound like I showed. But for things where you need to maybe make a little bit of a piece or make up something, you can use your basic wood filler. It's much thicker than your joint compound, and take a little doing to get it out here. Come on. All right, so I got a chunk of my putty. And if it feels a little wet, you can let it air dry for a moment until it is more like a paste. And then I'm just gonna form it as if I was forming clay. And the great thing is that this is sandable. So I'm just gonna use it to reform, to make it a little cleaner. Now you're gonna have to let this fully dry again overnight before you go and deal with any type of sanding or fixing. That's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and hope to see you soon.